Hello and welcome back to Twin Creeks Farm. It's been quite a while since I've updated you guys. I always think I'll have time to film and then just stuff's too busy, so it doesn't happen. We'll try to make more of a priority of it. But it's July now. We just had Canada Day and everything's growing. For 5 or 6 weeks we were quite dry. We got a little bit of rain right after seeding and then we were quite dry. And now the past 2 weeks have been very wet. There's still some water pooling in the fields that'll hopefully dry up a bit this week, but if you didn't get your first cut off early, it's not off. So we did, this field behind us, we did get it off early because there was an alfalfa caterpillar in it, but there's a lot of hay around that is still in the field. So today we're going to go around and see some of the different crops. I'm going to treat a little bit of burdock that we got growing on the edge of one of the fields I meant to get to earlier, but didn't happen, and then it kept raining every day, so it's kind of hard to get that treated. So see what we can get up to today. Got a chemical and we're just adding our water. Picked up this backpack sprayer so that we can get the work done a little easier, especially if we're walking around the edge of the fields. Don't have to carry it and try to pump and applicate at the same time. So you can just pump with the one hand and spray with the other and carry it with your back. Try not to have to spray too much, but it's just sometimes you can't really avoid it without going too much out of your way. While we're over here, I guess I'll show you the pigs. I don't think you've seen them yet. I did take some footage when we dropped them off, but never really got around to putting up a video. So it's two Berkshire Tamworth Cross gilts. They're supposed to be bred. Say due this month. We'll see if that turns out to be the case. It's kind of trusting the guy, taking the guy's word off Kijiji, so we'll see, but hopefully we'll have some little piglets running around here soon enough. And here's one of our corn fields. It's corn planted on 60 inches, which is a little bit unusual. It's almost twice as many plants per row is what it's supposed to be, and then just half as many rows. Another rented field that we have where we planted, it's lighter soil and it looks a lot better. Here just the planter had I should say had a hard time closing the row well, because it got so dry and hot so quickly that if we'd got it done the start of the week, it might have done all right, but by the end of the week when we got it seeded in, the ground was so hard that it just had a hard time doing a nice job. So there's parts of the field like here that don't look too bad, and then it's just really variable. If you look out on the hills there, it's pretty light on the hills. So we'll see what happens, but we do have the cover in. You can see it starting to grow in here. It's growing really well right here. It's we got such heavy rain that it did push some of the seed around, so this must have been a low spot that it pushed a bunch of the seed to, so it's quite thick here, so who knows what that'll turn out to be once it actually starts to grow. A lot of that's just going to die out, but you can see elsewhere a lot of it starting to come up. So someone's going to think that there's an awful lot of weeds in our fields, but in a couple weeks when this really takes off, but it is meant to be there. There's a fair bit of oats, and there's red clover, well, crimson clover, not red clover. There's crimson clover, berseem clover, hairy vetch, tillage radish. Did I say hairy vetch? I think I did. Annual ryegrass. And I think I'm forgetting something. Anyhow, it's a decent little mix. And the plan originally had been to drill it in, to kind of put up a bit of a interseeding rig and drill it in between the rows. And it just kind of didn't have the time or the money to make that happen, so we broadcast it, and we saw that we were going to have this rain the past little bit, and so decided to get it broadcast before we got that. So it's on, and it germinated really well for us. You walk around the field and you can see the cover growing everywhere. So hopefully that'll come up through the rows and help control weeds. There's it'll do some different things for us. The legumes in it should help fix some nitrogen for next year. The thought then is, like we've got this row here and the row here, 60 inches apart. Normally you'd be on 30 inches, so normally you'd have a row in between. The thought is then, with this cover growing in between here, that next year we can offset by 30 inches and grow corn on corn, and hopefully not have the same sort of negative effects that normally, the negative yield effects that normally happen with corn on corn. We don't have kind of the same monoculture that you would, and we're planting it into different crops, so it's something I want to see if we can do to grow that. And then, like I say, we got the legumes in there to help fix some nitrogen to help the corn grow next year, and there's some annual ryegrass and the tillage radish, the daikon radish, that will help with soil structure to just make it a little better. We are, if you can kind of tell here, we're going no-till, so I'm hoping that the plants will do some of the work there for us in just managing the, like I say, soil structure. This field was pretty rough last year as a hay field, so I would have liked to have had some sorghum in the mix for dealing with that, but it releases something like a cyanide in the first hard frost, and I want to be grazing the cover at that point, so I figured it's just safer to not have it in the cover, and just work with some other crops. And then again, the clover is in there. Will hopefully attract some good pollinators. I've seen, since the cover's gone in, I don't know if it's just because it's wetter, and maybe that's what the birds like, but I've seen all sorts of birds in here since the cover went in. I'm sure they were eating some of my seed. But see, like, you got, maybe you can or can't see, like there's a little bit of rutting right here. There's some really bad rutting over, it's wet over there, and it's a little bit from whoever rented it before, and a fair bit, I guess, from me too, the rutting. So hoping that some of the plants that we'll work with will help alleviate some of that and just make the field a little nicer. And then with that, with the whole cover, then we'll get this corn harvested in the fall, and after that, then there should be a nice healthy crop that cover turns into, that we can turn the cows out onto to graze. So initially the plan was to have this as must have come out with the manure. Initially the plan was for this to be a silage crop. We've sold a fair number of animals since the spring, just with the way commodity prices went, so I'm not sure if we'll have the same need for silage corn. We might just, it will depend on what the crop looks like with how variable it is. Like if you look across here, just the different size in the corn, it'll really affect the yield, because a lot of the smaller plants beside the big plants won't produce a cob. So like you see, like there's those couple down there. There's a missed one there that didn't germinate. That's probably a miss there too. Like there was probably about a 6-week emergence window, and then again, see spots like this where just nothing ever came out. So that 6-week window is really not ideal for good yields. So we're gonna kind of have to make a judgment call in the fall to see if we think that the crop is worth combining, or if it's better to either chop it or just graze it. Figure out what to do there. Thankfully with all that rain, there is a lot more feed in the area, but then in terms of this being as a silage, then kind of all the forages, the value's a little less, so even if it's not going to be an ideal yield, it might still make sense to combine it. We will see. But yeah, that's the start of our cover. I'm really looking forward to that growing up and getting a couple feet tall and being a good carpet in between these rows. And I really want to see those the clover plants flower maybe. I'm not sure how that'll go with the bit of, like, by the time it's mature enough to flower, there might be enough shade that it maybe doesn't have the energy to do that. But you see the corn is starting to take off. It would be it's not quite, I mean certainly if you folded them up they'd be waist high, but some of it is starting to get to look decent. There's some really good corn around that makes mine look pretty bad. The other 30 acres of the 60-inch corn that we have is on a field that's not near the road, so everybody's going to see this and see my terrible looking corn, and nobody's going to see my good looking corn, so that's too bad. But oh well, it's the yields we want, I guess. One thing about this sprayer is, at first it's not too heavy, but 10 gallons on your back for a little while does start to weigh on you a little bit. So, say I do kind of prefer, we do spray, it's just with the no-till, we figure that that's doing more good for us than not spraying wood. And there are people that do no-till and organic, but it's kind of a tough go, and so we figure at least going no-till, we're building some organic matter in the soil, sequestering some carbon. We're not really using anything with I'm out of breath walking here with this thing in my back. The Roundup that we're using, it's got like all our corn is Roundup Ready corn, so it's being sprayed. That's why it looks so like it was a hayfield to start the year. The cows were grazing on that before we sprayed it. But yeah, I figure that the Roundup, like, it's... Some people seem to make a big deal about it, but to me that's got to be one of the safest sprays, because there's pretty well no residual on it. Like, you can plant into it the next day. If you got seeds in there and they emerge the next day, like, they'll be fine. It's some of the other stuff that I'd be more worried about. But even then, just such a small amount that ends up actually going on per acre. You think about the number of plants that's touching. An acre is a big area. A lot of sprays are only, you know, a gallon, 5 gallons, 10 gallons per the acre. Well, if you dump out a 5-gallon pail, that doesn't go very far. So you think about that going over 40,000 square feet. But I mean, it's all calculated. It's all, the government looks at it all and decides what is safe and allowable. So I think they're pretty cautious about what they let go on the fields, and I'm not too worried about it. So yeah, that corn's Roundup Ready corn, and that lets us go no-till. That lets us do all sorts of good stuff for the soil that would be more difficult to do otherwise. So we're headed up the field. The most of this field is still rented by the neighbor. We're just taking a field back a year from him. So this is his hay field that he cuts and bales in small squares as long as he can get it dry, and exports a lot of it to the States for horse customers, some racetracks and stuff like that. But I was in that bush yesterday chasing the one neighbor's dog toy in the middle of the field. Ooh. The one neighbor has some steers that are out, and I think one of them is living in that bit of bush, but he's feral. He's very wild. But one of my heifers ended up getting out of her pen yesterday, and she's wild enough. But the steer was around in the morning, and the steer took off the second he saw me, and of course the way they are herd animals, then she takes off after it. So they ended up in there, and to chase them all the way to the back. It was a bit of a process, but I got her to come back in and get back in with the herd. And I thought maybe the steer would go in with them, but he didn't have any interest in that. I went to sort of go the one side to see if he'd then spook towards the herd, but no, he just took off in a hurry. So our heifer's back in, and he's long gone. So some milkweed, we'll see if that attracts some pollinators. You see lots of monarchs around. Oh, I don't know if you can see it. There's one flying there. You see lots of monarchs around these days, which is nice. So that's kind of with those cover crops in between. I'm hoping we see all sorts of wildlife in there, and the birds, the insects, all that does help with the corn too, and hopefully manages some of the other pests that would go after the corn. And again, then with it not being sort of a monoculture, then just enough sort of competition and different things that hopefully any sort of diseases get slowed down from getting too much of a foothold in there. With the 60-inch rows, it gives a lot more space for air to get through there, so hopefully there's a little bit less pressure from funguses and diseases that hopefully we just don't have to use fungicides. Say it's the less we can spray, the better. I do believe that, but I certainly don't have a big problem with using Roundup either. Just not more than we have to. Here's the nice healthy crop of burdock. It's not really what I was coming to spray, but I'll get it on the way by because it'll just cause more to grow. That's the, you can see all the little burrs growing on there. Get rid of them. They spread like crazy and they're nasty, and nobody likes burrs in their clothes or burrs on their cows or dogs or whatever. So this isn't in the field, but it will just make stuff grow. Oh, here's another one. Wow. This one's 7 feet tall. Well, get rid of it. See, I'll show you where we are on the edge of the field. Spraying. There's mosquitoes back here. Trying to get it out of what will be the hay field next year. It's oats this year. It's got the handle on the one side that builds up pressure in the tank, so then the air pushes. Oh, shorts might have been a bad idea with the bugs. Wasn't thinking about that. But then it builds up pressure, and then just get some on the leaves, and the plant will absorb that right in. So I say, I know it's not in the field, but it growing there with the way that burdocks spread, it just existing over here will mean that we have more in the field. So there's our oats that are our cover for our hay field. We'll show you that in a second, but you see here, this is all supposed to look like that, and it's just a crop of burdock. So really need to get that under control. It will just continue to spread if we don't, and then it will be a field of burdock, and that doesn't do anybody any good. This is probably a good spot to talk about what's going on with this field. So you see you got the hay seeded under there, and the oats are supposed to act as a cover, and the thought was to combine them, and then we'd have feed and seed and straw from the oats. But with one thing, the oats aren't as tall as they could be. They're actually not terrible now, but they're not as tall as they could be. They got a little bit stunted with how dry it was, and that really meant that now with this rain, all that hay is catching up. There's more of a difference here than some spots. But you can see over there maybe the oats aren't that far, or the alfalfa is not that far below the heads, and when this goes to mature, it won't get any taller. The oats won't. They'll just ripen, and that hay is just going to come and it's going to pass those, or at least come up to pretty well the height of those oats plants. So that's not really ideal for combining. It's good for our hayfield for next year to know that it's kind of established that well, but it doesn't make a good, sorry, swatting mosquito. But it doesn't make a good combining field. The other thing you maybe can see is you see some yellowish heads there, and that's not it ripening necessarily. It's with this moisture. I'm pretty sure what we've got going on, it's maybe just starting to ripen, but some of those heads you see, it's like right there, looking like there's some fusarium head blight on the crop, which is another, you see there, let's see if it'll focus. Kind of orangey looking, and if you peel back there's another one there. It's not like crazy pervasive yet, but I expect that will expand. It is a fungus that will spread, especially in these moist conditions. So the quality of the grain is going to go down. And well, another thing too is there was kind of trace amounts of barley in the crop last year. And so we saved seed. We bought seed last spring, and there ended up being trace amounts of barley in it. And we thought, oh, okay, well, we'll try, or I thought, okay, we'll try and get some cleaned out when we're cleaning the seeds for this year, and try and reduce the amount of barley. And I guess the barley was just enough bigger that that's one of the things the seed cleaner does, is it pulls out kind of the biggest and best seeds. And so with that barley looking, see there's some barley there, with those seeds being a little bit bigger than the oats, it really just concentrated it, so kind of everywhere. There's just some everywhere. I thought that, you know, some would grow and I'd be able to go around and just clean them out of the field. But it's just, there's just so much of it that there's no point. So, I say the thought was to combine this, and we'd have the straw and the grain. But I think that that's going to be a losing battle, so we might just cut this here shortly and bale it and wrap it for feed. And we do have some oats left, but we might just buy some new seed next year and try to get some clean stuff that we can start over. But it's too bad because with the rain that we've had, there should be really good head fill on these. It should be good quality, but there's the barley in there, so it's not ever really gonna be able to get a good price for us at the mill. And then with the fusarium in there, we'd probably want to be spraying that. It should have been maybe sprayed already if it was gonna go to the mill. So now it just, I think, kind of cost control and dealing with the situation, we're probably just going to bale this for feed, and then again we'll have even more feed, so then the silage will be a little less important. There's the other thing I spray if I see it, is a bull thistle. That one's on the edge of the field, but it'll just make more in the field. They're in the hay field that we did this spring, there was a bunch of them, and it's just, you're constantly grabbing the bales of hay and getting thistles in your fingers. So the cows will actually eat them when they're dried down. They won't eat them standing, but they'll eat them in the hay. But I don't like getting thistles in my fingers. But it is kind of nice to see that the oats here are belly button high, so hopefully at least get a decent forage yield off of it. We did fertilize this crop. You say it was probably only a foot tall before we started getting the rain. Maybe slightly more than a foot, maybe 16 inches. And now it's got to be pretty close to 4 feet tall, so it is nice to see to get something out of that. Well, that's all sprayed there now. We'll let it burn down, and then I expect that just with how thick and tall it is, there will be some smaller plants underneath, so I might have to come back and treat it again. Then probably what we'll do is, once we can get it cleared out, we'll try and get it seeded again in the fall, so that we don't have to keep doing this. I kind of say nature abhors a void, so if you leave it open, something will grow. So we'll try to get it cleaned out and then get some hay growing in there, so that we don't have to spray it again for quite a while. There's a strip here on this side of the creek, and there's another strip further up that I don't have a clue what was going on with the planter. I did come back in after and try to broadcast in here, and it is growing a bit, but so it means we are growing some weeds. Hopefully the little alfalfa plants will start to take off here, but it just means that a bit of the field will always be a little weedier than the rest, and it'll spread. So hopefully that alfalfa will start to take off. Don't want to go too crazy because I don't want to get the little alfalfa plants that are growing in there. It's a lot of that stuff would make hay, it's just not ideal. So, not ideal, and if you leave it, it'll take over. I do try to get in here and just pull some stuff out manually, but kind of forgot where I was going, got distracted by that bit. Oh, I spot a thistle over there. I'm gonna have to not forget about that on the way by. It'll drive me insane. Go over to the pen. You can see there's probably almost 2 weeks ago, I came and sprayed down here. So clearly some stuff that got missed. So we'll try and hit that this time. But you can see it's definitely killing off the burdock on that fence line. This is our hayfield that we've got first cut off of already. So we'll see. I did go around, and once the thistles started to regrow a bit, I tried to get some of them. But we'll keep an eye on it. It was this side of the creek that was really bad for them. Try to keep an eye on them and go treat them. But it's nice to see with the rain that it's really coming ahead. First cut wasn't very good, so it's nice to see that we'll probably have a pretty productive second cutting. This side of the creek was cut, I'd say almost a week after the other side. Just kind of the way weather and equipment issues worked. But it's nice. It's probably, we'll see here, but some parts of it I'm sure are over 2 feet tall now. It's just over knee tall. That's measuring with my hands. It's got about an 8-inch hand, and it's over 3 hands, so should be 2 feet tall anyways, and I'd say that's one of the better spots. But getting there, I wouldn't say that when we did first cut that it was much over 2 feet tall, so we've already almost got that there. I don't know, it's down close to the creek, so maybe it would have been more like 30 inches there. But the weather's not going to be good enough here for a bit anyways to be able to cut that, so I would bet that by the time we're ready to cut, by the time we get the weather to cut, that we'll get a better yield off of the second cut than we did the first, just the way the year's going to go. What's going on, girls? Hey, buns. 2, 4, 6. Who's missing? 2, 4, 6. One of them might be in the barn getting a drink. But did some work. It still needs some more work, but you can see the new fence posts. Strung up some high tensile. There's just no good fences left on the barn or on the farm. You can see all the posts were, a lot of them were snapped off. Some of them we snapped off to get them out, but that didn't take too much effort. Nice to have it more or less done. It's 3 strands right now. The plan is to add 3 below and 3 above, and it'll be a 9 strand. We still have to put the corner braces on, so they're not, there's a bit of tension on, but they're not cranked down yet. So, but it'll be nice to have that, and then it'll be able to hold pretty well anything. You see it's a bit of a mess. We're still cleaning up. All the rain has kind of really slowed down that kind of progress. It's pretty mucky in there.